For 2 years, the media waited for Robert Mueller to expose Trump. But now it's over, and it turns out
there was no collusion with Russia.
So, did the media screw up? And will they face a reckoning? This is America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. The media. It plays such an important role in our democracy that it's sometimes referred to as the fourth estate, as important as the three branches of government. Founding Father Thomas Jefferson once wrote, "Were it left to me to decide whether we should have a government without newspapers or newspapers without a government, I should not hesitate a moment to prefer the latter." But as crucial as media are to America, there are also a lot of problems with the media. And a pretty clear example of this is what happened with the Trump-Russia collusion story. Now, I'm going to assume you already know about the allegations that Donald Trump colluded with Russia to win the presidency, and how this became part of a 22-month investigation led by special counsel and knockoff beer distributor Robert Mueller, and how at the end of all that, the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. I know that's a pretty quick summary, especially for those of you who just got back from a 22-month vacation in the mountains of No Wi-Fi Stan. Welcome back. I hear the mountains are lovely. Next time you go, please take me with you. But the point is, a lot of very prominent newspapers, websites, and TV shows led the public to believe Trump colluded with Russia to win the election. Some called it Russiagate. It became the basis for magazine covers, op-eds, and late-night talk shows by comedians we trust.
Here we've got a list of things that could possibly connect Trump to Vladimir Putin.
And for MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow, it became her bread and butter.
Russia, Vladimir Putin, Russia hates Russia, Putin, Russia, Moscow, Russian, pro-Russian, the Russians.
That was all from just one episode of her show. Over the past 2 years, we've heard opinions like this one from former CIA Director John Brennan that the president was guilty of high crimes and misdemeanors, committing acts nothing short of treasonous. We've heard a former NSA employee claim Trump would die in jail. From all the media reports, it seemed like it would be an open and shut case of collusion, except it turned out there was no conclusive evidence of it. So how did this happen? Well, it's important to note that the media didn't make up a Russia collusion story out of thin air. There was the Trump Tower meeting during the presidential campaign when Russian lawyers offered damaging information on Hillary Clinton to Donald Trump Jr., which people either saw as suspicious or incompetent or no big deal. Personally, I go with incompetent. Everyone knows that if you want to get something done, you talk to Ivanka. Then there was Paul Manafort, Trump's former campaign manager, and his shady lobbying for Ukraine and Russian-linked companies. Then there was Trump advisor Roger Stone and his contacts with WikiLeaks. And there was former Trump lawyer Michael Cohen and his payments to Stormy Daniels. None of these things ultimately involved Donald Trump colluding with Russia, but at the time they fed the story. And then there was the Steele Dossier, a piece of opposition research created by former British spy Christopher Steele that became a cornerstone of the Russia collusion story, especially after it was published in full by BuzzFeed. That was despite the fact that the dossier was initially ignored by the media for months because they couldn't confirm many of the allegations in it. And it wasn't for lack of trying. Here's Washington Post reporter Greg Miller talking about trying to confirm one piece of information from the dossier.
We literally spent weeks and months trying to run down. There's an assertion in there that Michael Cohen, Trump's lawyer, went to Prague to settle payments that were needed at the end of the campaign. We sent reporters through every hotel in Prague, through all over the place, just to try to figure out if he was ever there, and came away empty.
Now that's good journalism. Except the only time I could find him saying that was in that one discussion aired by C-SPAN. And nobody watches C-SPAN. Bob Woodward, a Washington Post reporter famous for uncovering President Nixon's Watergate scandal, recently wrote a book about the Trump presidency. So he also looked into Russiagate. He said, I did not find espionage or collusion. Of course, I looked for it hard. But notice I pulled that from the conservative Daily Caller. It was never mentioned in any Washington Post article. I couldn't find his quote on CNN or in the New York Times either. A narrative started to develop among the mainstream media based on the idea that the Trump-Russia collusion story was definitely true even if the evidence wasn't clear. And this became one of the biggest problems with the Russiagate reporting. Reporter Matt Taibbi says this in his upcoming book, Hate Inc., Why Today's Media Makes Us Despise One Another. For years, every hint the dossier might be true became a banner headline, while every time doubt was cast on Steele's revelations, the press was quiet. Plus, for some people who don't like Trump for unrelated reasons, they felt they couldn't question the Russia collusion narrative for fear that questioning it would empower Trump. According to New Yorker writer Adrian Chen, either I could stay silent and allow the conversation to be dominated by those pumping up the Russian threat, or I could risk giving fodder to Trump and his allies. And people who did question the narrative were sometimes smeared. The editor-in-chief of Politico published this story in February 2018, called Confessions of a Russiagate Skeptic, Why I Have My Doubts About Whether Trump Colluded with Moscow. He took a beating on social media, and then a few months later, he came out with a follow-up, Why I'm No Longer a Russiagate Skeptic. The extreme reaches of the Russiagate story became what Slate called resistance fantasy Twitter. People who made a name for themselves hyping up the Russiagate story. But even more established media made mistakes. The New York Times came out with a story that Trump campaign aides had repeated contacts with senior Russian intelligence officials, according to 4 current and former American officials. Former FBI Director James Comey later testified in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee that the New York Times report was not true. This CNN report? Retracted, and 3 journalists were forced to resign. Was a Trump server communicating with Russia? Nope. Robert Mueller has proof Trump directed his lawyer to lie to Congress? Not according to Robert Mueller himself. Did WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange meet with Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort in the Ecuadorian embassy in London? Really? To this day, no evidence of that has been found by any other media outlet, and The Guardian has refused to answer questions about the story. That report is still up on the Guardian website with no note of any kind about the controversy, just like CNN still has this story up. There are 2 tiny problems. One, CNN lied about their source. They said one of Cohen's lawyers declined to comment. In fact, it seems he was their only source. And he was lying. There are so many of these stories I could go on for ages. But there's one more example that is so egregious, it deserves to be singled out. CNN ran this story. It was the smoking gun, the proof that Trump colluded with Russia. Russia hacked the DNC and gave emails to WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks then gave those emails to Donald Trump Jr. MSNBC said an hour after the CNN story came out that they independently confirmed the story. Except there was one problem. Their anonymous sources got the date wrong. So instead of it being a smoking gun where the Trump team got advanced access to the WikiLeaks documents, it turned out the documents were already public. So instead of a smoking gun, it was just some totally pedestrian message from a random member of the public suggesting Trump Jr. review documents the whole world was already talking about. All of the anonymous sources CNN and MSNBC cited somehow all got the date of the email wrong. To be fair to CNN and MSNBC, once their blunder was revealed, they took responsibility by deleting every trace of their mistake they could and demanding YouTube remove copies of those videos. And after 2 years of this, Mueller and his team, who were assigned to investigate this impartially, finally reached their conclusion. The investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. So what happened? Why did so many media get Russiagate so wrong? Did experienced journalists become stupid? Did media editors have a coordinated agenda to feed lies to an unsuspecting public? Or was it a deep state conspiracy led by the reptilians and the Queen of England? Well, the answer is complicated, but not that complicated. One big reason was attention. Social media analytics company Newswhip told Axios Media that in the last 2 years, there have been more than 500,000 web articles written about Trump, Mueller, and Russia. And those 500,000 articles generated 245 million likes, comments, and shares on social media. That's a mind-boggling amount of attention. And with that attention comes money. The media make more money when more people are watching. And more people watch when there's an interesting controversy. We live in an era of short attention spans, where 57% of you have already clicked away to watch another video. So media really have to grab viewers by the eyeballs. Hence, scandal, scandal, scandal. In the first year of Russiagate, total profits from cable news Big Three, Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN increased by 13%. That makes sense. Most people would rather watch their favorite media speculate about terrible things the president did, or in Fox's case, how it's all a conspiracy by the left to frame the president. They'd rather watch that than some lame, unbiased news report that says, tonight on the 6 o'clock news, nothing happened. Or even worse, tonight, something happened, but we're not exactly sure what the whole story is, so we're going to do the responsible thing and not speculate about it until we've done some more research that's not based on anonymous sources with their own agendas. Now, who wants to watch that? Let's bring on a bunch of people and have them all yell at each other at once. And that's the other problem with the media. The 24/7 breaking news hype machine where everyone is an immediate expert with an immediate spin on whatever happens immediately. As Vanity Fair puts it, MSNBC anchors, and in particular, its opinionated progressive evening hosts, turned the Russia story into a gripping daily soap opera that not only helped grow the channel's audience, but kept it coming back for more. Unfortunately, a lot of it could turn out to be about as true as a soap opera too. That doesn't change the fact that 2018 was MSNBC's best year ever. By the end of the year, their viewership was up 121% from the first quarter of 2016. It came with graphics like this. Bombshell reports in New York Times and Washington Post reveal possible links between Trump and Russia, even though those reports only revealed possible links that turned out to be untrue. But the good thing about using mistaken narratives to drive up ratings and therefore advertising dollars is this. Even if you turn out to be wrong, you don't have to give your advertisers their money back. The question being asked now is, will the media face a reckoning for how they handled it? Americans have lost faith in traditional media. I mean, isn't that why you're watching some guy on YouTube talk about the news? But the coverage of Russiagate exposes fundamental problems in American media. Trump has long complained about the media being unfair to him. Now, maybe he has a point? Will people trust the next big CNN bombshell about the Trump administration? At least some people won't. And that's a problem, because the free press was supposed to be an important check on the government, not a biased tool focused on ratings and attention. This whole situation has also caused a greater political fragmentation of the media. Liberal media focus on exposing conservative corruption. Conservative media focus on exposing liberal corruption. And neither side feels it's terribly necessary to disclose their own errors. Will the media learn their lesson? The Mueller Report will be publicly released next week. Surely, media will step back, take the time to read it carefully, and then report on what it says. What's that, Shelley? I see. Instead, they're going to speculate on what an obstruction case against Trump could look like if the report says something about obstruction. You know what sounds good right now? A trip to no Wi-Fi stand. Pack your bags, Shelley, we're going on vacation. Forever. Thanks for watching this episode of America Uncovered. Remember, this show is funded mainly through support from viewers like you. As a thank you for contributing, I pick a question from people who contribute through the crowdfunding website Patreon and answer them on the show. CIA Bank asks, when are you changing the photo of you on this site to one with a beard? Good question. Done. Now, while that was truly a hard-hitting question, I just want to remind all Patreon supporters to leave a question for me on my Patreon posts. It's my way of saying thanks since YouTube demonetizes a lot of our videos. So, once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.